Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Sunrise on the Inside podcast, a space where we share inspiring interviews and stories from thoughtful leaders in business, health and wellness, entrepreneurship and sports. Here we talk about tools, habits, routines and tactics they use that help them feel calm, revived and rebalanced whenever they face challenges in life. I'm your host, Nico Estrella, a serial entrepreneur, former professional soccer player and co-founder of Waku. Welcome to the third episode of the Sunrise on the Inside podcast. Today's episode was very fun to record and very touching as well. My guest today is Emily Kanter. She is the second generation co-owner and CEO of Bainbridge Naturals, a 47-year-old natural wellness retailer with 2 locations in Cambridge and Boston. Originally from the Boston area, Emily spent several formative years in Portland, Oregon, with her now husband and fellow co-owner Caleb. While in Portland, she received her MBA from Bainbridge Graduate Institute. She serves on the board of directors of the Independent Natural Foods Retail Association, INFRA, and is an advisor to several organizations including Real Pickles, Protect Our Breasts, and Findaway Adventures. Emily is a leader who I admire a lot, and in today's episode, we talk about business as a force for change, and Emily demonstrates a lot of courage as she opens up about her challenging fertility journey and how to overcome grief, feelings of shame, and difficult emotions using the healing power of opening up to others. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed it myself. Hello everyone. Emily, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited to have Emily here in the podcast. I'm not sure if, I think we've told this a bunch of times, but for the people who doesn't know, Cambridge Naturals, it's a natural product store here in Cambridge. It's an awesome store. We love it. And it was the first store where Waku was ever sold. Back there, we started working together in 2017. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. I think maybe we were one of your first retail locations.
You were the very first one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I am very excited to have Emily here. She's a very good friend of Waku, a very good friend of us, me and Juan. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much, Nico. It's really a pleasure to talk with you.
Emily, I wanted to start asking you, I was reading a little bit about your journey, and I saw that when you were younger, you went to live in Argentina to teach English, right?
I did, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, like, how was that experience? What were you doing in Argentina?
Yeah, it was really wonderful. I was so excited to have the opportunity. When I was in college, I really wanted to study abroad, but because I had transferred schools, I was trying to make up credits, and it just didn't seem possible to go abroad and also graduate on time. And I also wanted more of an immersive experience in another country. I didn't want to just be like a college student, hanging out with other college students who are American. I wanted to be really living in a new city, a new place, and experiencing it in that way. So when I had graduated, I at the time spoke very good Spanish, not so much anymore.
But how is your Spanish now?
It's pretty poor, but maybe I'll take some classes again. I took Spanish in elementary school, high school, all the way through college, and then wanted that immersive experience. But I also needed a job. I couldn't just sort of go and live somewhere. So I took an English teaching course and flew down to Buenos Aires and spent 6 months there, or a little under 6 months, teaching English and living the city life, and just absolutely loved pretty much every minute of it. It was really wonderful.
Buenos Aires is beautiful. It's a very
so beautiful. Yeah.
And where were you teaching? Where were you giving these classes?
So most of the classes were sort of like contract. So I worked with a couple different companies, and I was teaching adults. It was a little harder to get a job teaching in a school. You needed kind of like a certain permit or degree, and I didn't have that at the time. So I was teaching adults who wanted to use English for business or for travel. And I would teach classes most of the afternoon at different offices around the city. And obviously didn't have a car, so I walked a lot of the city. I saw so many different places that tourists might not get to, and really got to immerse myself in the city life that way. It was really fun.
That is amazing. And why Argentina? Why did you pick Buenos Aires?
Yeah, I had some friends who had gone there for study abroad and really loved it. I think I was excited just by the the sort of like metropolitan aspects of the city. I've always really loved cities. I love how vibrant and exciting they are, and I wanted to be in a place where I could walk easily and kind of learn the city in and out. So I had people recommend specifically Buenos Aires to me, and we also had a family friend, this woman Rita, who had grown up in Argentina. She had been very active with the abuelas who were trying to find the children who had been disappeared, or the parents who had been disappeared during the time of conflict. And she was really immersed in the history and the political activism in Argentina, and she really connected me with a part of the city that, again, I think most tourists didn't have like access to or didn't dive into. But she was really she really helped me immerse myself in that world.
That's such a nice experience. How old were you when you went there?
I was just turned 22, so still very young, and but very excited to be in a new place, and kind of like getting to know myself for the first time in a way. I think especially in America, college students are kind of coddled. You have this very sort of like um, uh, very coddled experience where everything, meals are provided for you in school, and, you have your classes, and you don't have to do too much to sort of, I mean, for the average American college student, I know it's certainly, there, not everyone has that experience or has that level of privilege, but, going to some place on my own where I didn't really know anybody, even though I had made connections through Rita and her friends, I didn't really know anyone personally that well, and I had to kind of make my own way and get comfortable also being on my own, walking again through the city by myself often. And so it was a really formative experience for me to learn a lot about myself and what I liked personally versus sort of like what I had been taught to enjoy, or what, my um, friends before that had been
Wow.
into.
I really like it. I love Argentina. I've been to Buenos Aires and to Cordoba. I
Oh
went there
yeah,
when I was 15 years old. So I went to play soccer. I went to play a tournament with my high school,
cool.
I remember. So we went like 2 weeks with my friends from high school to just play soccer there and just like go to all the stadiums and all that. For me, it was more like a more touristy thing.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I fell in love with Argentina. I would love to go back at some point.
Yeah, me too. It was such an interesting time to be there. I was there in 2007, and it was not too long after the economic collapse that had happened in 2001. And so the city was sort of, and the country was really kind of getting back on its feet again. And so it was a really interesting time to be there. And I'd love to go back now and see, what it's like. I think there more and more tourists have gone, so I don't know how much it's changed, or but it was so much fun, and just the, the architecture and the food and the music and the
All the
street life.
culture, yeah.
Yeah, so vibrant.
It's amazing. And I think that for me, being like a soccer fan, it's an amazing city for that. Like,
Yeah.
people is crazy about soccer there, so it's like almost like a religion there. So it was very fun to see, to experience all that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't make it to a soccer game when I was there, but I heard that they're pretty intense
Yeah,
experiences.
they are pretty intense. I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you what um what is one of your favorite memories that you have from your time in Argentina?
Oh, that's a good question. So I always think about, again, I said like I walked through the whole city. Well, not the whole city, but I walked quite a bit of it. And one of my favorite walks to do was actually through my neighborhood. So I lived pretty close to the Plaza Italia, which is a very sort of popular neighborhood at this point. It's kind of got an old world feel to it, and it's like, really beautiful streets and beautiful old buildings and lots of little shops. And there was this one really beautiful bookshop that had part of it was covered in a glass ceiling where like there were tables and chairs inside, sort of like an atrium space. And so you would walk into the bookshop and then you could go to the cafe and then sit in this like covered but very bright and light space and drink your coffee and listen to, at the time, there were CDs. It seems like, what's a CD these days? But at the time they had like a CD listening booth where you could choose music that you wanted and they would play it for you, and then you could decide if you wanted to buy that CD. And so I would, bring my notebook or my laptop and do some work, or write some emails to friends and listen to some new music and then maybe buy that CD. And it was just such a wonderful like experience to be kind of on my own in this really interesting and cosmopolitan place. And yeah, I loved it so much. I kind
That's
of think
amazing.
about,
Lovely.
yeah, I know, if I ever open a bookshop, which is kind of a fantasy of mine, I want it to be like pretty much exactly like this bookstore. So maybe I'll have to go back down and do some research and visit it.
That's amazing. And was this place like? Did you just went there like one time, or was a place that you were going often?
I went pretty often. I probably went like at least twice a week. I mean, and the other wonderful thing I loved about being there, and this was, unique to my experience, but I'm sure other people have had similar experiences. I lived in this apartment that was a converted hostel. Um, and so there were many different rooms, but it was, it's a more of a long-term apartment. And I lived with people from all over the world: South America, Europe, North America, and we. It was just like a very multicultural experience, and everyone spoke different languages, and um, I got to learn a lot about, just different people in the world. And it was really fun and interesting, and everyone sort of had like different interests that they brought to the table. And we had this pretty cool, kind of like old and rickety, but it was fine. Roof deck. It probably wasn't like up to any code, but it was beautiful roof deck, and we always had people over, and would have these big dinners together, and everyone would cook a little something. So it was a really communal experience as well. And, my first real kind of like adult living on my own, again, not sort of in the college bubble experience where I was kind of finding myself and meeting great people.
I love that. I love that. Sorry. So, because you grew up in Boston, right? You
Yeah.
you grew up here in Boston. So you
Yeah.
went to school, to college in Boston University. Is that correct?
Yeah. so technically I grew up in Cambridge, which, you know, we don't like to be called Boston necessarily.
I apologize. I
No,
apologize.
no. We're Cambridge is its own city, you know. No, but we're so I grew up in Cambridge, and I actually went to college for a year and a half in Connecticut, which, you know, not too far away, but then transferred to Boston University. And so I was pretty close to home, but I was on the other side of the river, and I could kind of have my own college world, but then maybe still bring my laundry back home on the weekends, or borrow my parents' car if we wanted to go somewhere. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's this brings me up to my next question that I have, and um, since you probably since before you were born, right? Cambridge Naturals already existed, and you
yeah.
grew up with in this world of the natural product space and having like a natural product store. Um, how was it like to grow in a space like that?
Yeah, it was definitely unique and different. I don't I didn't at the time have many friends who really had similar experiences. I think, you know, when we talk about natural products today, they're so ubiquitous. Like, they're everywhere. You can buy kombucha at the gas station. You know, you can find healthy foods on every corner. And that's really wonderful. I mean, I think that's ultimately a really good thing. But when I was growing up, and you know, even before I was born, when my parents started the store in 1974, and I was born a little over a decade later, 12 years after that, and or sorry, 11 years after that. Math is incorrect. I was born in 85. So my parents started the store, you know, it was definitely the 70s. There was a sort of back to the land movement. The organic movement was growing, but there really wasn't like it really wasn't available on a commercial level, natural products or natural foods, at least a wide scale. And when I was born and when I was growing up, you know, it was still a very counterculture thing to eat sort of healthy natural foods. Most of my friends ate like Wonder Bread sandwiches with turkey and mayo, and you know, their potato chips for snack, and they would have their like fruit roll up thing in their lunch. And I always really wanted to share or swap lunches, but nobody nobody wanted to swap lunches with me, because I always had, you know, like sprouted whole grain bread with almond butter, or you know, brown rice with black beans and carrots, and it was just like not cool. I often had like seaweed in my lunchbox, things that were not that might be actually normal or familiar to a lot of cultures, but not to Cambridge in the night, you know, not to this like world that I was in public school in the 1990s.
That is
So
funny. Yeah, I can
yeah.
totally relate to that because
Oh
when I
yeah.
was a kid, I remember that my mom used to send us like also like lunchbox, and I remember that a lot of my friends in the high school that in the primary school that I was going, they were they would just like get some snacks and some food in the
Yeah.
bar of high school. So it was also like chips, like brand chips or like hot dogs or this type of stuff. And I remember that there were days that my mom used to send me hard-boiled eggs, and I
Oh
hated
yeah.
it. Like I hated it because I knew that as soon as I opened my lunchbox,
Yeah.
everybody was smelling like the hard-boiled eggs, and I was like so ashamed. I was like, oh my god, no,
It was
send
so
me
good for
again.
you.
Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, it was so good for me. But as a kid, I was also like always wanting to trade my hard-boiled eggs,
Totally.
but with no
Yeah.
success at all.
Yeah, no, same. Nobody would trade with me, and everyone thought my food was weird or like smelled weird or something. And I, you know, again, like I think it's become very mainstream these days to eat healthy and also to eat foods from all kinds of different cultures around the world. But at that time, it was definitely, at least again in this area that I was growing up in, like not common. And I was certainly the odd kid in my elementary school. So yeah, I resonate with your hard-boiled egg. I got a lot of egg, things as well.
I
And
love that.
yeah, to be honest, like I loved the food. I actually really enjoyed eating it. It was just being the kid that was different than everyone else. That
Yeah,
feeling is always hard, but
yeah. I think
yeah,
more when you're a kid, this feeling, yeah, it's I can understand that. And
yeah.
from this period, I wanted to ask you, what are some of like your favorite stories from this period in your life?
Yeah. Well, kind of on that vein, one story that I often tell is, so my one of my best friends growing up, her mother, we all went for a day to the pond, and uh, my parents were friends with her parents, so we were all there together. And then there was like a ice cream truck that showed up to offer snacks, to sell snacks at the pond, and the ice cream truck sold like confections, but also like snacks and chips and things like that. And my friend's mother, I think, took pity on me and, knew that my parents wouldn't buy me the fun treat. So she bought me and her daughter each like a little tiny bag of Doritos, like as a treat. I don't even think that they ate Doritos too commonly, like at home, but it was like we were out on a fun day and bought me these chips. And my dad was walking up from the pond, and I like tried to hide them because I knew he was gonna overreact. And I was right. So when he got to the top of the hill and saw me, probably covered in like orange Dorito cheese and trying to hide my bag, he lost it and started kind of yelling at my friend's mother again, who was also his friend, and was like, I can't believe you bought my daughter Doritos. That's like me buying your daughter heroin. And
Oh my god!
like total overreaction. And I don't even think I knew what heroin was at the time. It was just like, Dad, please don't, make this embarrassing for
Oh
me.
my god!
And he's since relaxed quite a lot. I mean, he still wouldn't want me to be eating Doritos necessarily, but he has like he was just very, I think it was hard at that time for him to like um live and promote the lifestyle that he and my mom held around, when people didn't really understand it or weren't into the same things. And I think he felt like he had to be way more vocal back then about it, and way more strict. So
Such a funny story. I love
yeah,
Michael. He's
yeah,
such a funny guy, and it's so good to speak with him. I love every time that
yeah,
I get to talk with him. Yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna tell you, like I've seen him, and I think now he's pretty much more relaxed.
yeah. Oh, for
than
sure. Yeah.
that. Hey, just a quick pause for a message from Waku, and we will be right back to the interview. We are very excited to let everyone know we've just launched Waku's crowdfunding equity campaign through Republic, a platform that allows anyone to invest in private startups like Waku. Waku is now part of a very exclusive group of highly vetted startups from Republic, and now you can become an investor of Waku starting with investments as small as $100. If you'd like to learn more about why to invest in Waku and why this is such a great investment opportunity, you can go to republic.co/Waku. That's republic.co/WAKU. We will be thrilled to have you join us in our journey to bring to the world the most refreshing herbal tea with gut health benefits and help to create impact in the livelihoods of hundreds of Ecuadorian farmers. Let's get back to the show. I think this is a good segue for my next question, and it was so your parents owning Cambridge Naturals, and I know that you have more siblings, right?
Yeah, I do.
did you always knew that you were gonna be in charge of Cambridge Natural? Like whenever you were growing up or in college, did you know like, okay, I'm gonna take charge of the store at some point, or when did that happen?
Um, I always loved the store. I worked there as a kid. Once I was sort of eligible age to work. I worked there as a teenager and in high school and in college. And I, as a kid, like as a younger child, would spend a lot of time there after school. The store was always, we like to say, the store was always the first child in my family. So even though I do have older siblings, it's like the store is the oldest sibling, and probably the most needy of all of us. But I, 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 I wanted to be involved somehow, but I pursued other things after college or in college, and then afterwards, I wanted to explore different career opportunities. And it wasn't really until I started to think about business as a force for change in the world and how businesses could be catalysts that I started to really realize the impact that my parents' very small business had actually had on its local community and then also on the industry and, on sort of a wider scale than I think is always visible when you think about just like the square footage and the brick and mortar element of the store. It's hard to like think of it as having this big impact, but it's been around for so long. So many people have been impacted, hopefully, positively by Cambridge Naturals, and we hear stories like that all the time. People who love the store, people who've changed their lives because they've found certain products that really work for their health needs at the store, or certain people who've been really influenced to adopt a more healthy and sustainable lifestyle by being around the store. So I started to think of it as like this catalyst for change. And it was a really exciting opportunity to me when I was in my mid-20s. I went back to grad school to go to business school, and that's where I really started making this connection. And it was kind of around the same time that my parents were saying, we're getting older, we're probably heading, well, they would never use the word retirement, but we're probably, maybe we want to work a little less or something. And so Caleb and I, my husband Caleb and I, started talking about that possibility, and it seemed like, wow, what an amazing opportunity, and honestly a privilege that not everyone gets the chance to have, to walk into an existing business with so much opportunity and be able to affect change in that way. So it was kind of an opportunity we couldn't pass up.
That is great. And what do you think made this shift for you regarding business? Like, what was it? Only seeing all these interactions that your parents had and all the impact that the store was having, or was there something else in your life, like either in college or like a book? What was the thing that made you start seeing businesses as these? Because I really agree with that statement that you made, and I think that's one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship and businesses is that if done correctly, they have such potential to create impact and create change. So I love that. And for you, what was the thing that made you start seeing the businesses in this way?
Yeah, it was for me actually. It was really catalyzed by reading Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. And I had actually, when I was in Argentina, a friend of mine gave me this copy, which was, it had been like sitting out in the rain, so it had kind of gotten like all waterlogged and was like all warped. And but I took it and I started reading it, and I actually kept reading it after I had left Argentina. And I actually ended up moving from Argentina. I moved to Taiwan and was teaching English in Taipei for almost a year. And I was reading this book and thinking like, wow. So the Omnivore's Dilemma, if you're not familiar with it, is about sort of the rise of our industrial food system in America and how we went from a very different model of like farming and agriculture and foodways to this very industrialized model that is not very healthy and not very sustainable, certainly from a climate perspective, and also from like a farm worker perspective. It's really detrimental to the health of farm workers and their, and the dangerous jobs and poorly paid jobs. And so it really started shifting how even though I had grown up in this world and kind of like knew these things, it started shifting my awareness of like how embedded like our food system was with these giant corporations and how they had decided we were going to eat or, consume really processed foods. And then I moved back to the US. I started working for a nonprofit that was focused on like business practices, sustainability and business practices, local food systems. And I really loved that work. I wasn't thrilled overall with just like the nonprofit world. I really liked the work we were doing, but I felt like it was a really tough job in the nonprofit world, at least, again, a very privileged position, but just from a day-to-day perspective, I was getting pretty worn out by the work. But I ended up moving to Portland actually to be with my now husband, Caleb. And I worked for another nonprofit there. But at that point, I was kind of starting to think like that business actually, for-profit business actually was a little bit more or a lot more nimble, could make change happen pretty quickly, wasn't sort of beholden to like the grant process that nonprofits are kind of locked into, the grant and donor process, and that there was a lot more opportunity there to have an impact. And that was very enticing to me. But yeah, it kind of all comes from that original opportunity to read that book.
I love that. I'm going to read that book. I've never heard. I've heard about Michael Pollan, you said, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've heard about other books from him, but I'm gonna read this. Sounds very, very, very interesting book, and I love this because I agree 100% with all what you just said, and I think that for me, maybe it was not that similar because I never worked in a ONG or in a nonprofit. But I remember that before starting Waku, we always wanted to create a company that could allow us to make impact in Ecuador, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't really know what was the impact that we were trying to make. So when we started Waku, we made this road trip through the Andes Mountains where we were searching for the formula of Waku and just like trying all the different recipes and all. But also we used that trip a lot to just speak with the farmers and speak with them and just like try to understand what were their needs that they were having. Because at the beginning we were thinking we were going to have a model where we were going to partner up with a nonprofit that maybe can help in education for the farmers or giving clothes to the farmers, because like 70% of the farmers in Ecuador live under the poverty line, so there's a lot of needs and a lot of people it's like undernourished. So there's a lot of problems, and in this search we, at least that was like the experience that we had, and we realized that the best impact we could make, at least at the stage that we currently are as a young startup and not having like all the resources in the world. I remember very clearly talking with one of our first farmers that we started to work with, and we were asking him like, what do you think you need? Like, what do you think your community needs? And he basically just told us like, we just need to be able to partner up with serious companies and with companies that are not gonna exploit us, because he was like, we love what we do and we know that we have very high quality products, but at that point, like how the system works there in Ecuador, I'm not sure if it's similar here in the US, but farmers have to sell to middlemen. It's like because this is like a village that's literally in the middle of the Andes Mountains, that accessing it's like very hard, so they don't have a lot of like trucks that go in there. So once a week there comes like just like a big truck to the main plaza of this small village, and this is a middleman that buys all the crops that he wants to buy from the farmers. Let's say they buy the things at 10 cents, and then they go to the market in the city and they resell it at $1. So they pay the farmers like a tenth of the real market price
Wow.
for their crops. And a lot of times he was telling us sometimes these people tell us like, oh, they're gonna buy, let's say, 100 pieces of corn, and then they come and they just buy 20 from us, and then we get stuck with like 80, and all of that. It's just like we have to either eat it ourselves or it goes to waste.
Wow.
So they get like taken advantage of, and like a lot of times this happens. So he was like, yes, thank you for thinking that, like, trying to bring other things, but to be honest, we just like want to make sure that we start to work with you. You are not gonna do this to us.
Yeah.
So that was like when we saw kind of like a click, and it made sense for us, and we were like, okay, as the way that we're gonna help them is like, as we keep growing as a company, we can just keep working with more farmers, and just like cutting out that middleman and just paying them the real market prices. And of course, right now we're not still as big as we want to someday be,
Yeah.
but it's been very nice to see that, like as you said, like the impact that you can make. Um, you have to start at something, right? And probably right now the impact that we're making is a small scale, but you just have to keep going and keep growing, and be consistent. I think that's why I think Cambridge Natural is such an inspiration for us as a company, because you can see how even probably it's not like the biggest store in Boston, but you can really sense all the huge impact that Cambridge Naturals has had, even in like ourselves as a company. And I am sure that so much people has been impacted. So I really loved what you just said, Emily. Thank you for
Yeah,
your
no,
thoughts.
I thank you, Nico, and also like I'm so glad that that's been your experience in working with us. I think that I that's the whole thing for us. Like that's the entirety of what matters, is that we're having some positive impact on our local and our global community. And even though, as you said, like we're not the biggest store in Boston, we're obviously not like a national or even regional chain. But if we can help be part of the success of Waku, then that's having an impact in places we couldn't even imagine connecting with. You know, we don't have like personal partners in Ecuador or relationships with those farmers, so we rely on working with really great companies who get it, who have partners on the ground in areas that you know, need that support and need those opportunities. And it's our absolute privilege to be able to make those connections and then help people in our local area understand the impact of that too. And that's like honestly what matters to us the most. And all the other stuff that kind of gets in the way, you know, like day to day running of a business and all the ups and downs, and especially in a pandemic. But like at the end of the day, that's really what matters, and that's what feels like it's the most valuable reason for doing this and continuing to do this.
I love that.
So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I really love that. And for people that's listening, and it's from the Boston, Cambridge area, you have to make sure to visit the store. It's such an amazing store. Like and it's very cool because you know that everything that you will buy, every item in the store has been very well curated, and it's very thoughtful. Like there's a reason for those items to be there. So I love it. I love your store. Your store is my favorite store from
Oh, stop.
yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you. I
So,
appreciate that.
Emily, now I bringing back a little bit to the story of like when you were taking the lead there in Cambridge Naturals. How was that transition like? Were your parents like they completely stopped working for Cambridge Naturals, and you just to cover the place as the CEO of the company, or
No,
how
yeah.
was the transition?
Yeah, it was it was much more complex than that, and still ongoing. So when Caleb and I moved back, we actually drove back from Portland in 2014, and we got married in at the end of August, and then I started work at the store like just a few days after that. So it was a pretty tumultuous time in our lives because we had left our whole group of friends and colleagues and business school friends out in Oregon, and then moved cross country to kind of start this whole new life in a place I hadn't lived in quite a while. And also, I had been doing some marketing work for the store for a few years on a freelance basis, but it had really been a while since I'd been in the store. And it was the most important thing to me was to immerse myself in the what it was like to be in the store day to day as an employee. So I worked quite a lot that first year, especially a lot of putting in a lot of overtime hours, and sometimes it was really challenging. I came in, and a lot of the staff team really embraced me and made me feel very welcome, and really helped me become, again, like sort of immersed in the store and learn the systems from scratch. And then there was a couple people who just like weren't super thrilled that the daughter was returning, and I totally get it. I think it's like if you've been working in a place for a little while and someone new comes in, especially if you don't know sort of like their background or have their have sort of like insight into that, it can be a little like, what are they doing here, and why do they deserve to work here, and take on this responsibility. So I understood, but it was a bit tumultuous there for the first year, and it culminated with me breaking my elbow at the end of that year. And I was like, okay, yeah. I actually I was wearing these like really like flimsy sandals and just like slipped down these stone steps in Somerville, and like just fell and kind of like braced myself with my hands, but my elbow went one way and my arm went the other way. So it was kind of like the perfect cap to a exciting and tumultuous year. But one thing that was really wonderful from the get-go was that my parents embraced me and Caleb. Caleb started out not working immediately in the store, but then he eventually got pretty involved, and now is very heavily involved. But they really embraced us and the ideas that we were bringing from our business school education, the ideas we were bringing from previous work environments, and just some like fresh and new ideas we had for running the store. And they really gave us an opportunity to put our own spin on things, even though they were still very heavily involved at the time. And they have slowly transitioned out. I think we moved back and we kind of made it fun for them again. So then they were like, oh, wait, we're not leaving anytime soon. And we were like, wait a second. But it, over the last few years, it's been really fun to work alongside both of them in their different roles. And in largely due to the pandemic, they've both kind of stepped out for even further than they had, and they've really stepped out of largely the day-to-day and even sort of like oversight, but are still involved in an advisory capacity. They still, like, we run ideas by them all the time, we run big decisions by them, and they participate and bring their wisdom of 47 years of running this business to all the things that we're doing. So I value working with them so much, and having their wisdom and guidance in our back pocket at all times. I mean, it's pretty wonderful. But yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah, and I can see how challenging it is could have been this transition for not only for you but also for all the Cambridge Naturals staff.
Totally.
Yeah, and this brings me up to my next question, and is so far, what has been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced, either in your personal life or in your journey of taking the lead here in Cambridge Naturals?
Yeah, well, if I'm going to get really, really honest, the biggest challenge that Caleb and I have both been facing over the last 6 years, to be honest, is that we've been going through an infertility journey. We have been trying to have kids for about 6 years now, and gone through different fertility treatments, including IVF. We're sort of still in that journey, but we took a big break after I had a miscarriage back in early 2019, and yeah, thank you. It's been the hardest thing that I've ever dealt with as a person. The grief and the sense of the loss and sort of the existential crises that naturally follow that experience. But I think it has also, I hope, helped me. I mean, not to put a nice spin on it or put a bow on it, but it really honestly has led me to grow a lot as a person, I believe, and to have a lot more empathy for different people on their journeys wherever they're at, and sort of the challenges that we all face as humans. I've friends who've lost loved ones, especially in the last year, but even before that, family members. And I have a lot of empathy now that I think I didn't have, or a lot of capacity for empathy that I don't think I had as much of 6 years ago, and sort of an understanding of the human journey in a deeper way. And I think that has honestly helped me be a better leader in many ways. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Emily. I don't think I can understand all how hard that was for you. It's such a thank you so much for telling that story. And I wanted to ask you, so during these periods, and if of course if you would be able would be willing to share, what do you think helped you to just kind of I won't say just keep going, but if anybody that meets you, you are such a joyful person, and you're always has such a good energy, and you can sense all the happiness that you live with. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think has helped you? Do you have any recommendations for somebody that's going through something like this? What helped you during this journey?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I mean, I think it was many different things, but I think that early on in the journey, I was pretty private about it. I wanted to kind of keep it close to just Caleb and I. We weren't sharing with too many people what we were going through. Some of it was frankly due to feelings of shame. I had lots of friends who seemed to be able to just, spin around and all of a sudden be pregnant and have a baby, and then maybe have one more. And it was really hard. I again, this is just super honest. I've gone through feelings of shame, or do I not deserve this? Is there something wrong with me? Did I do something bad in a past life that means I'm not worthy of this? And going through all of that shame on my own, or that sort of grief and private feelings on my own, was so overwhelming and so difficult, and I think did actually impact how I was able to open myself up to people or be close to people. But I finally kind of broke down, or maybe got to like a low enough point that I realized I really needed to open up and share with people around me, people I was close to, but even people I didn't know that well, just because like I didn't want to have this thing that was affecting my life on such a like deep level on a daily basis, because like when you're going through IVF, you're like having to give yourself or your partner give you shots all the time, and you're feeling like up and down, and it's a pretty intensive process. So I didn't feel like I could keep it inside anymore, and I started very slowly sharing it with people I trusted, and then, as I said, sharing it maybe with other people on kind of a need to know basis. And every time I did, I was kind of expecting people to like look down on me or like, I don't even know, but I was really nervous. And when I did start opening up, not only did I not have anyone, like look down on me or like treat me weirdly, but honestly, people were so kind and warm and generous with their love and care, and people I didn't even know that well were just like so effusive. And also I started to learn so many stories of other people who had gone through similar experiences, and it kind of made me realize how little I knew again about like the journeys that each person was on. Again, it might not be the exact same journey, or it might not be the exact same type of experience, but I learned about so many different people's loss and grief and messiness of life, and it really helped me to just start opening up and being more honest about what we were going through. And then like to read and learn the stories of other people, even though I didn't want anyone else to be suffering, like I didn't want them to be suffering in any way. It did help me to understand the struggles that other people had gone through, and not feel so alone.
Yeah, I can. That's amazing, and I think there is so much power in having like this community and being able to have the courage to open up, because I think it does take a lot of courage to just like start speaking about the things that just like are super hard for you to experience as yourself. So I really like that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that, Emily. And
Yeah, for sure.
in this process, so there is this very useful tool that's just being able to open up to talk about it. I think um, it makes me think of also whenever it's a bit different, but whenever I am meditating and I am experiencing like I don't know, some very difficult thought or very difficult emotion, a lot of times just noting it or just like acknowledging it and just like either putting it on paper or talking it out kind of like takes away the power from that emotion,
Totally.
from that feeling, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I think that's very powerful. And besides this powerful thing, because this cathartic thing of talking with people, do you have any other practices that you do in your day to day that can help you deal with all these feelings? Because I know that, as you said, is a journey, right? And probably some days can be harder than other days. Um, do you have any other tools or habits that you do whenever you feel like this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about, when you put something down on paper or you say it out loud, it kind of, especially with negative things, kind of helps lose its power. I think that's really been really true for me. One of my, so I am terrible at the like sort of typical form of meditation. I have a very overactive mind, and I find that like I've never been successfully able, despite trying all kinds of different times and ways to like just sit down and meditate. But I know that it has tremendous value, and I really admire people who can do it, and want to know their secret to doing it. But for me, and actually I've learned that this is for me a meditative practice. I am such a walker. I mean, I walk everywhere I can, as much as I can. And I this is another thing I sort of learned from my dad. My dad is a really active walker. If he doesn't get out for a walk pretty much every day, he's a much grumpier person. You can ask my mom about that; she'd probably agree. But I'm pretty much the same. Caleb, I went out for a long walk the other day, and when I got back, Caleb was like, "Oh yeah, you're so much more relaxed than you were." He's like, "I can always tell when it's been a little too long between walks for you." So walking is my form of meditation, and I find that even though I'm still thinking a lot while I'm walking, I'm not sort of doing the more traditional, like trying to calm my thoughts. It kind of becomes that over time for me. Like I stop having racing thoughts and sort of scattered thoughts, and it's a much more calm and focused thought process. And I often come up with some of my best either ideas or thoughts or hopes or dreams like while I'm walking. Maybe I should carry a paper and pen so that I can write them down.
I was about to ask you, like, when you go for these walks, do you go and like, are you listening to music or to anything, or are you without any technology? How are these walks that you take?
Yeah, sometimes I listen to podcasts, and in that case, sometimes I'm listening to something, but then I'm like having sort of thoughts about it while I'm listening. So even though I'm paying attention, I'm sort of in my own world as well. And sometimes I just try to walk without any listening to anything, just so I can kind of like enjoy my surroundings and be really present. And I find that I always just notice like amazing things when I'm walking. Like if I'm driving somewhere, I'm just trying to get from point A to point B like as quickly as possible. But when I'm walking, not to sound cheesy, but like it's really about the journey, not about the point A to point B. And I see like people's amazing gardens along the way, or a new business that I didn't realize was there, or like something funny. And it always sparks something for me, which I really love. And I try as much as possible also to like cook meals at home. I find that really meditative and creative and fun, and I love sharing meals with people. And also, again, like the other coping mechanism for me has been working really hard to develop friendships and connections with people, strong connections with people. I find that has really helped me truly feel more joyous on a daily basis.
I love that. What is your go-to dish whenever you want to impress someone?
Well, I love making roast chicken in the oven. It's a little too hot today to think about putting something in the oven. It's kind of like I'm already overheating thinking of it. But like in a nice cast iron skillet with maybe some potatoes and like a really delicious salad. And maybe like some nice flavorful spices on the chicken. That's my go-to. But I like to explore. I love like the New York Times cooking app. There are so many fun and exciting recipes on there as well. And yeah, I love making fun and different dishes that I haven't tried before.
I love that. I think one of my favorite things to do, we were doing this a lot before the pandemic, but was just like hosting once a week. I was living with Juan at that point. I was just like hosting dinners once a week with friends, just like to cook something for them.
It was. You guys had us over.
Yeah. Now I think with all the vaccines, and now it's gonna be easier to start doing those dinners again. So I would love to have you and Caleb over someday soon.
Yeah. We had so much fun that one time we came over and you cooked us dinner. It was just really so much fun to see your home and hang out with you guys in a really relaxed way.
I did my one go-to dish to try to impress people. That's my Ecuadorian ceviche.
You did. You impressed us. We loved it.
I'm glad you liked it. Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. It was was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I think one of the main things that I take from our conversation today is this power of just opening up yourself and having that courage. Because I think that me personally, I have normally a hard time on doing this. And I'm not sure if it's the same here in the US, but me growing up in Ecuador, it's a very like macho culture and like kind of like you're not kind of like allowed to just like be talking a lot about your feelings, and just like if you are feeling bad, you just like you have to brush it off and then just like keep going. So I think growing up with that, not knowing a lot how to talk about feelings, has made it challenging for me now that just like being able to speak out how am I feeling. So I think it's an important thing to be doing, and to just like start to become better and having the courage to just be more vulnerable. I think, because I think that's probably the thing that I would be scared of. It's just like showing yourself being vulnerable. It's something. It's something scary, I think. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
No, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that as well. And I really appreciate that. I think too many of us have been scared for too long to be vulnerable with each other. And it's like really part of the human journey to open up and build community with each other. And it certainly builds a sense of like safety and trust when you can be vulnerable with each other, and really helps deepen connections. So I thank you for sharing that with me as well. And thank you for inviting me to be on this podcast. It was really fun.
Such a pleasure, Emily. And to finish up our conversation, is there anything you would like to share with the audience? Any new projects from Cambridge Naturals that you would love for people to check out?
Sure. Well, you can find us on Instagram at Cambridge Naturals. We're on the web at cambridgenaturals.com. We got some fun new crew neck sweatshirts with our old.
I want one of
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, have kind of like a retro logo, throwback logo on them. But other than that, if you're in the Boston area and you want to come by and check us out, please do. And also please grab a Waku from the cooler.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily. And if people wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can send an email. info@cambridgenaturals.com. I'm one of the people that gets it. But also just, feel free to reach out on our social media platform. I'm sometimes on there. We have kind of a team that's operating it. But yeah, just come check out the store.
Awesome, Emily. Thank you so much again for being on the show. I'm sure that we're going to be talking soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Nico.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Nico again. And just a few more things before you take off. If you'd like to be part of the Waku tribe to be the first one to know about the launch of exclusive flavors, special promotions, and content about health and wellness, just go to livewaku.com, that's livewaku.com, and sign up for our email list. And if you sign up, I hope you enjoy being part of our community.